So Image Pro allows you to create collections of predefined ROIs, annotations, and measurements. These collections are called feature collections. So let's just go through what each one of these types of features are. So the ROI, that's the region of interest. This allows you to restrict image processing or analysis to a sub-region of the image. Annotations, these are text, arrows, or markers intended to allow the user to deliver a clear message in posters, publications, or presentations. And measurements, these are analyzed objects segmented from the background based on criteria such as intensity, size, shape, etc. And these are all features that exist in a separate layer to the image and don't affect the data beneath the image unless and until they are burned into the image. So let's start with where we find the Features Manager. So we need to be in the Select tab. So from the Select tab, we have a control that will allow us to either show or hide the Features Manager. And by default, you're going to find the Features Manager on the right-hand side of the application. But Image Pro, of course, has a very flexible user interface, so you can untoggle it from this position, toggle it elsewhere, or have it floating free in the application. Now let's consider regions of interest. So you may find you have certain regions of interest that you need to use repeatedly throughout your analysis. In order to save you the task of recreating those regions of interest, we can use the Features Manager to store them. So here you can see an image with 3 different regions of interest. And I can use the Features Manager and select Add All. And if I do this, my features are added to a new collection. So let's just take a closer look at the Features Manager. And you can see here that by default, the features collection is named after the image from which the features came. But I can change that. So here I've changed the name to My Collection. And if I click on this plus button, you can see that this particular collection contains regions of interest. And again, if I click on the plus button here, you can see each of my regions of interest in my collection. So you can see that I've got a polygon, a circle, and a rectangle. Now I've got the option of setting the whole collection to an image, or I can set an individual part of the collection, an individual object from that collection to my image, or I can remove objects from my collection by clicking on the cross associated with each object. So if we just take a quick look in Image Pro, if I open my features collection now, so I'm just going to open my collection, and let's start off by clearing all the objects. So here I can see my collection of objects, and I can restore individual objects, or I can restore the whole collection to my image. If I want to add additional features to my collection, so here you can see I've added an ellipse, then I can select the option to add, and I get the choice of adding that either to a new collection, either to an existing collection, or to an existing group within my existing collection. And that's what I've chosen to do here, and now you can see that in my collection I've added my ellipse. So it's really important to mention that we can save and restore collections. So collections can be saved and restored for use between sessions. So there's no limit on the number of collections you can save, and there's nothing to stop you from restoring them over very long periods of time. So now let's move on to consider annotations. So annotations are really important. Annotations let users tell their story. And we can find annotations again in the Select ribbon. Here we can find the group of annotations tools. Now each annotation must be configured in terms of their color, their size, their font, their fill, and their opacity. So that takes work, and we really don't want to be repeating work if we can avoid it. So I strongly recommend that annotations be added to collection for reuse. So here you can see I've added my 4 letters, A, B, C, D, and a couple of arrows, and they're all added to my collection. So again, I'm just going to take a look at Image Pro. If I take a look at my image, I'm now going to open my annotation collection. And here we can see my publication annotation. So I might, for example, want to restore, let's clear everything off first. I might want to restore my letter C, one of my arrows. Once I've restored these features, I can move them, place them where I want, and I can make annotating each image a very low labor enterprise. Next, I'd like to consider measurements. So the Features Manager is really indispensable when identifying objects in one channel or image, but doing the analysis in a second channel or image. And you can see here in my slide that I have one image that contains my nuclei and a second image that contains the same nuclei in the GFP channel. And what I want to know is whether each nucleus is expressing or contains GFP. So what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm using the Count Size tab, and I'm first measuring all of my nuclei. So I'm finding each of my nucleus as a measurement object. And you can see in the Features Manager that what I've done is I've added a new collection, so each of my measurement objects is added to a new collection. I then go to my second image. This is the one where I've got my GFP expression, and I use the Set Collection to Image control, and you can see that now each of my GFP expressing nuclei becomes a measurement object. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a learning classifier, and I'm going to classify each one of my nuclei as either positive or negative. If you take a look at the table beneath, you can see each one is now classed as either a positive nucleus or a negative nucleus. So by using the Features Manager to restore my measurements on my second channel, I was able to perform a complex measurement process really simply. And this is really nicely integrated with batch processing. So if I run a batch process here, I've added a folder of images to my batch processor, all arranged in pairs. So I've got 4 pairs of images, each one consisting of one image of a nucleus, and the second one of the GFP expressing channel. And if I start my macro, you'll notice that I'm very quickly able to measure my objects in one channel, save it as a collection, and restore it on my second channel. And I can quickly cycle through my 4 pairs of images. And that's done. And if I now go to the Review tab, check my Data Collector table, you'll see that I'm now able to get a count of negative and positive objects from each of my 4 pairs of images. So this was done by automating the use of the Features Manager. So it's really a very useful tool, very useful and powerful tool when integrated with batch processing and macros. Okay, so we can also change the types of our feature collections. So what I've done in this image is I've restored a collection of measurements, but I've restored them as annotations. And I now have the option to burn these annotations into my image. In this slide, what I've done is I've taken the same collection, but I've restored them as regions of interest. So now if I do any image processing, it will be restricted just to these regions of interest. So we can add our objects to our collections as one type, but restore them as a different type. So some good practice to keep in mind when working with feature collections is to clear collections when starting a new analysis. We have the option to save them, so there's no reason for us to keep them open when we're not working with them. And that clearing them avoids any confusion. Make sure we're always working with the correct collection. It's a good idea to clear all collections at the start of your macros for the same reason, just to make sure that our macro will always be working with the correct collection. And save your collections in default locations. This makes packaging of macros straightforward. So to summarize feature collections, the Features Manager allows you to make and set collections of ROIs, annotations, and measurements. Collections can be saved and restored, and they can be done so you can do this between sessions. And the Features Manager allows for powerful macros and batch processing. And that brings me to the end of my presentation on